La verdad es que impacta estar aquí y con esta presentación aún más. Pero más me impacta.
Well, for me, it's a shock to give a presentation, but it's a shock also to have services which we consider to be basic, like gas, light, electricity. But what if all of a sudden this goes bang and it just disappears? Blackout. How long would it take us to start panicking, start seeing riots in the street, things that we've seen in movies? But in an awful day, these things could happen. And what's the story in Spain? How's the situation in Spain? Let's look at it. What do we consider critical infrastructure? This is a good question. And by the way, this is something that isn't clear all the way. For instance, we have a water supply plants, energy systems. We always use nuclear plants because people are really scared of this. And systems like defense, for instance. That may include components that may be managed by control systems that are similar to the ones we use in companies. But we also have other systems like, for instance, telecommunications, television, radio, and infrastructures that allow for communication between different regions. In order to get to Santander, I took 2 trains, one from Valencia to Madrid and one from Madrid to Santander. Could have used other alternative means. Yes, I could have. This is also applied for traffic, roads, but private sector companies always need security. A place full of refrigerators, for instance, must be working in order for the food to stay fresh and healthy. Is this a critical infrastructure? No, but it uses similar systems. What you see here is a control panel, something that a technician, somebody would be looking at, or somebody from maintenance. Here you can see pressure pumps, etc. And these are things that we humans can interpret, and these are called human-machine interfaces. And we also have to bear in mind that all this information comes from somewhere. It is processed by systems that are in charge of managing all the information coming from different sectors, sensors and probes, in order for all this to be translated into our own language, in order for us to understand what is happening. So in the end, these sensors must be connected right from an industrial sort of oven or furnace to a set of washing machines or dryers or a reactor in a nuclear plant. So we need to manage these sensors in the right manner, in an automated or manual fashion. You choose. But like the previous speaker said, there's an engine called Trojan, and this is like Google, and this allows us to look for internet devices, all sorts of them, computers, industrial control systems, and you find funny things like these. For instance, where it says nuclear engineering, it sounds like fun, or other systems in the network where that you can access and look at it, and in the worst possible case, you can even control. And somebody decided, well, these systems are fine, but I want to be able to control them remotely from the house if possible. So is this necessary? Maybe not, but it's more comfortable. And this is where problems started. Here we just have a few from the last few years. I'm just going to focus on the ones that I highlighted And since 1982, even though this is an event that we need to be cautious with, because it is something that happened during the Cold War, and what we're seeing in 2017. Many things have happened in between. Some of them were made public, others weren't. And to begin with, let's focus on something that was a landmark when people started speaking about industrial facilities security. Stuxnet. Here, this is when systems started detecting something in Iran, something that was focused in this place, Natam, which is the heart of Iranian nuclear program. Those of you who are younger won't remember, but the problem there is that the government in Iran wanted to produce nuclear fuel for their plants. They are entitled to, of course, but other countries didn't like this because they thought that this nuclear fuel could be used for weapons, for instance. So what was done about this? In the first place, information was gathered, and it was discovered that this plant was used in a TLC system by a well-known company called Siemens, and they could be attacked. So these systems, together with uranium, centrifugal machines, well, this could lead to a problem. This is just a summary, but now going down to the details. So how did this attack happen? The place you just saw is not a place you can access easily, or there is no connection for workers to be able to see football games. No, this was very well done. No external system was used. Some USB devices were used in this attack. They found out which scientists had access to this plant, and they infected USBs in order for them to take them into the plant and in order to for them to do their job. So why do I believe that this is still the more advanced sort of threat? Well, because 5 vulnerabilities were used. There was no patch to would solve them, and so far many of these things were unknown. For instance, this would allow for the code execution by viewing files, and vulnerabilities that allowed to move around an internal network, making use of security gaps, and this only through one or several USBs. The idea is to know which systems, could interact, and to have a threat that would do things like we're about to see. How did they know which systems were being used? Well, the funny thing is that the propaganda of the Iranian government allowed us to know this. These pictures were taken during a visit of the president to the plant, and here you can see in red, you see which machines were working at the time, and details in the control panels with blown-up pictures where you see people working, and also details like the valves in these uranium machines in order to know who was using this. From then on, a map had to be done and to see which systems could be vulnerable. So what happened? Well, a very funny, smart attack. All the data that were fed from centrifugal machines to the operators or workers were normal, but actually they were fake, because the machines were not working as supposedly they were working. and the fuel that was being produced, none of that fuel could be used as this could be used as a fuel. So in the end, the program, the nuclear Iranian program, was delayed because of this problem. And it is estimated that almost 1,000 of these centrifuge machines had to be thrown away. And who was behind all this? Well, nothing has been said about this, not officially anyway. One doesn't need to be too smart to know that Israel didn't like this Iranian program at all. So obviously, many people were interested in this plant not working. So now we move to 2014. It's no longer Iran. Now we're moving to a very nice region, but which is in a conflict right now. And I'm speaking about Ukraine and what's happening in Ukraine. In Ukraine, many workers in utilities or other plants started receiving mails like we do on a daily basis, but funny sort of mails like this one, which supposedly comes from the Minister for Industrial Policies in Ukraine, and with an attachment, a zip file, and behind it there's something that is hidden, like a document, but that can be executed. This run. This is used in order to attack a critical structure by somebody who has control to these facilities. When they realized that it was no longer easy to include this executable thing to ZIP, late. Then Ukraine started having problems with Russia, and everything that was related to war, army, dissidents, rebels. That was quite interesting. So what did hackers do? They used a supposed report. It was hidden behind a PowerPoint presentation. There was information about these commands. And this is what the operator, the worker, could see. Well, he couldn't see what was happening behind all this. And here, two files were being uploaded and that were embedded in those documents. Two files that were hidden in a location, and one of them was hidden behind a .gif, but that could be run. That was executable.
Buscaba abrir una puerta trasera en estos sistemas.
That was runnable. So this way, remotely, a hacker could do anything. Attacker could do anything. So all the alarms went off, and obviously the criminals, the attackers, stopped using these techniques, using this malware, and they started doing something different, that is, including malware within the macros of an Excel document. And this is an example, and we saw many more. They started including new functions. They didn't want to leave a trail, so they wanted to destroy the part of the hard disk they wanted to destroy. Once they had gone in and done whatever they wanted to do, they destroyed the hard disk. This is very bad if you do want to do a forensics sort of analysis, because you want to know which files have been downloaded and which ones have been run, and if they didn't want to destroy the whole hard disk, they looked for the extensions, they erased them, and not only this, but apart from this, they did other things. They used another alternative, or they used another pathway. Since they saw that the issue of macros works and sometimes doesn't work, what they do was to Trojanize a legitimate application. For instance, SSH. So they planted Trojan version, and what they did was following. They left a password, a default password, embedded there so that an attacker from the outside could access that machine that was compromised. So using some tools that allowed attackers to have a second entry gate. The conclusion from all this was that in those 2 dates, especially 23rd December 2015, a blackout happened, a blackout that affected around 500,000 people in an area in Ukraine. Now let's imagine the situation, 23rd of December, Ukraine. If those of you sitting here think it's cold or chilly, imagine what it was like in Ukraine. December, no lighting, no heating, apart from wood or coal, and no possibility to use any electrical device. So this represents a considerable attack. This really is an attack because it's affecting a very important part of a region that's fighting a neighbor. People started coming up with theories of what could have happened, whether this could have been an attack, and the media and everything. So what happened? Actually, after analyzing this event, we saw that even though black energy hadn't been the main component of the attack, even though so it had been used by criminals in order to access and to destroy any traces of the attack. And if you want to know how a worker felt at the time in that situation, I brought you a video clip where you can see how attackers took control. Here you can see the mouse, but the operator, the worker, is not touching anything. It's somebody from the outside. In this case, there was no problem because this screen wasn't connected to any critical system. But this affected the good operation of the plant. Can you hear the workers saying, "What's going on?" Well, this computer wasn't connected. They were trying to cut off power. Here they had no access to any switches. And one of them saying, "Yes, I'm being told that in other sectors in the areas of the plant this is happening. Somebody is handling and touching switches." And you see that the worker's not touching anything. And this is done through a backdoor. 3 plants were confirmed to have been shut down, speaking about January, and then there's January last year. People started doing research, investigating what the threats were, who was behind, why, and how they'd done it. So many experts around the world got together with policing units and the army in order to find out who developed that malware, how. So attackers didn't like this, and what they did was to learn more. They evolved. They made use of what they had already done, and they started building upon this, and they started using other techniques. But they started adding new functions and even launching other techniques to fool everybody, to trick everybody. And Said, we don't want to make money, we are criminals, but we don't want to make money. This malware can be analyzed, and when we analyzed it, we see that there were many similarities with others, previous ones. Not because of the functions, because of the codes they used. They shared functions, functionalities, but they disguised the code, but kept using it. And in fact, it was very funny because we saw how they even started attacking systems that so far had been immune or left out of the normal attacks. For instance, with Linux servers, here they, as you can see on this screen, they planted a message. They were saying that your wonderful servers had been infected, and that all your files are affected, and if you want get them back, you need to pay. You have to pay. Here, at the time, bitcoins were not worth $10,000, as is the case now. The 2,000 bitcoins in 2016, asking for 2,000 bitcoins in 2016 was an important amount, and nobody paid that I know of. But this was a distraction maneuver because they wanted to do was to change their ways of doing things. Maybe they wanted to start making money. Or was there anything behind this? And whatever was behind is something we found out about. For instance, something called Petia, or not Petia, or Discoder. It's a malware that we saw this year that sent you a typical message, and in a very funny way. The computer was rebooted, saying that it was going over the hard disk, and then it started processing the files and sending this message. Problem number one, the files cannot be recovered, no matter how much, if you pay the ransom or whatever. The encoding system wasn't good, and it means that you could recover them. Second, it provided you with an email address in order to get in touch with them, something that was destroyed, so there was no way to get in touch with them. And third, if you look at the map, this happened mainly in Ukraine. The rest of the countries where maybe indirectly some companies were affected because their headquarters were in Ukraine, and they used the same program or software that had been used by attackers as attack vector. A very interesting document has another thing we've seen, that the main sectors that were victims was the finance sector, the oil sector, and the manufacturing sector. In the case of finances, this is critical. Why? Well, because of this. What you're seeing here is the ME-DOC program. It's a software that's used massively, but by almost all companies in Ukraine. Petia, if you recall the name, appeared at the beginning of June. Just the revenue statement. And how could the attackers locate an infection and for it to be done in Ukraine? So they used the servers of this application. This is an official FTP compromised by attackers. So they used malware. This file you can see here that was uploaded in 31st May 2017. Since the updating was done automatically, users didn't suspect anything. They said, well, a new application, let's download it and install it. But this wasn't the first time they did this, because they tried before. In May, for instance, they already tried to propagate another malware known as X-Data, depending on the manufacturer, and they had used a very similar method, but they hadn't been successful. It was just a tryout or just a test. Right now, they had this updating be installed in many companies in Ukraine, and they did succeed. You can see how different companies had their systems affected. In Spain, we didn't see much of this in Spain. Maybe some companies who were interested in that region and they used this accounting system. So very few. Just for you to see the difference, on the left you have the Trojan version of this application, me.doc. Here's the other one, and you see the differences. So it's a very smart vector, because from the world of security, we always advise you to update your system, your applications, and they make use of this tip, this advice, in order to use this in order to go into thousands of companies in a region they were interested in. And this is not the last time we'll see this, because other examples, other cases have happened, not as serious, but many of them. If you trust a supplier and somebody compromises their servers in order to infect us, and we've seen this in the case of ransomware with Mac, where several applications have been compromised during for several hours using Trojan versions that these criminals used. And now let's move to Industroyer, which is the most important threat this year, and that is oriented to the industrial sector. Why? Apart from my colleague, Don, there's another company, Dragos, that we collaborate with, because we got many samples from them at the beginning of the year, and we started analyzing the way they worked and how they could affect an industrial facility. It makes so much sense. It's so logical that people couldn't believe that this could be used. Several workers get in touch with a control center they control, and which is located within the vector area. They infect one single machine or several in a company or a factory or a utility, and this machine is the one that sends or receives commands from the industrial control systems, ones that activate turbines, etc. And if these commands are not expected, or they're no longer sent, then or stop being sent, then a utility stops producing power, electricity. The difference with respect to previous attacks is that the idea is not to infect the industrial systems or the PLCs of a given brand, but they want to do is to gain control of them by sending them illegitimate commands, orders.
¿Cómo es el esquema que han hecho ellos?
So, how did they do all this? Here you can see a summary of what they were able to achieve. They set up two backdoors. They have a main one and a backup one. They use the main one to install their malware. The question is how, although we believe that is electronically. And they install a Trojan version of the notepad through the second one that can always always be used in case the main one is discovered. They also install additional tools, for example, remote control tools, in order to program an attack for a particular day. They can change that day anytime they want, and then to remove all trace whenever they've achieved whatever they wanted to. So the change here is the way in which they execute their actions. They aren't trying to infect PLCs, and they don't seem to want to have remote control. They just want to send out commands that the system interprets as valid. For that purpose, they use very widely spread protocols in the industry. These four protocols, the first one is a bit older, enable the communication through the serial port with other industry systems. So what they are trying to do is to see that they are actually executing, that there is a process running, and what they do is to bring that down and use their own, and also use security devices in order to avoid entrances from the communications ports. So they are the only one authorized to establish this communication. Then there is this 104, which is more modern, which allows to send commands through a network with a TCP/IP configuration. It's more thorough, and it allows to look up for files with logs and configurations in order to establish routes to download the commands. There is a problem attached to that protocol, because the serial port communication would be local, but with 104 they can do it remotely. Actually, what they would do wasn't an attack to a particular system. They would look for all the systems in the network through two processes, range and shift. And what they would do was to shut them down one by one automatically. Instead of using the mouse and clicking them out, they would look for all the monitored industrial system processes that are controlling different appliances, and they shut them off one by one automatically. And when this is finished, the program is over. And this doesn't only affect power plants. They are using this in companies and infrastructure services all over the world. And they have their own established standards that won't change in the short and mid-term. So these attacks, if used massively, can have very serious consequences. What they are looking for, or what they want, is to shut down the switches so that a particular company cannot supply electricity or provide the service they provide, whatever it is, but in a more elegant and automatized way that also leaves less traces. And there was this bonus. What they also did was a service attack against the Cybertech Siemens services or systems. What they did was sending a UDP packet with these characteristics in order to stop the system from running. This is the system that manages communications between the operator and the critical systems. So if these fail, well, people are in deep trouble. So this came as a bonus. They didn't really need to do it, but well, they just decided to add that functionality. So we've talked about attacks in networks that we use on a daily basis, but these attacks use other vectors. You don't need to use a computer or a hook on the internet looking for vulnerable machines and backdoors. There are other communications that enable attacks to systems that are controlling cities, for example, signaling devices. If you don't know, Santander is one of the biggest smart cities in Spain and in Europe, and there is a website where you can control the status of all the sensors regulating buses or trash trucks, and also sensors that detect faults and failures to be repaired by the city council. There is a conference that you should look at, which was How to Hack Santander, and he showed some examples proving that these systems were hackable as well. There are many uses. For example, we have traffic signs that may be even funny at some point, but the thing gets more serious when you can modify emergency systems, ambulance systems, the systems that need to work seamlessly when they are needed. So if these can be modified with a software-defined radio system, that is a very serious thing. Carlos Garcia said it very clearly in his talk. Do you have 30 euros? You can hack your city. So with the right knowledge and with the right material, which isn't precisely expensive, you can control emergency communication systems and many more things. He provided the components. This is all you needed. If you buy this kind of devices and AliExpress, for instance, you can build the device for less than 30 euros. Of course, you need to have the knowledge, but if someone can make this with the right amount of research, it is very concerning that no measures have been taken in order to avoid this from happening in a larger scale. We have this example from Dallas in May. You are hearing emergency sirens whenever there is an earthquake, a flood, or a critical situation. If I remember correctly, this was on Saturday or Sunday. It was during the weekend. People were resting, and it's no funny at all that this siren goes off because it's pretty loud at the same time. So what happened? Someone pushed the button when they didn't have to? No. No operators admitted to have pushed the button or sent the command. There is this emergency, whereas everything looks very quiet. What happened? Radio frequency attacks were used in order to trigger these alarms. You can find more about this example in my friend Alex Casanova's blog. And this is just an example of what can be done. There are many more possibilities that aren't being dealt with, and they can be done via radio frequency. You don't even need the internet in order to attack those systems. There are other information protocols that are as effective, and they can be very serious because nobody has taken these accounts seriously, or they have underestimated these attacks. Because people have trusted that security is based on obscurity. If nobody knows how this works, we are safe. But this is absolutely false. It is very easy to obtain critical information about how critical systems work, because somebody with the right amount of patience can discover security breaches. I can think of Ruben Santamarta, for example, who is able to find security breaches on critical infrastructures. Now, the question is, after seeing all this, are we as bad as people say? Are the media telling the truth, or are they overreacting? Another question, where do they get that information? Because here they say Spain is the third country in the world with more cyber attacks. How do they know? Because there is this report, and who are the main two? Well, the US, England, and, well, where is France here? Where is Russia? This is like the Spanish flu during the World War. Some countries aren't providing any data, and therefore we are escalating The flu, for example, during the First World War had terrible consequences. Spain was providing data about the number of casualties, and the flu got the name of Spanish flu, and not because there were more casualties in Spain, but because Spain was one of the few countries providing data, and this is the same thing here when it comes to cyber attacks. It's true that cyber attacks have increased, but the problem isn't only that. It's interesting to know that we are able to detect them more efficiently. Maybe 2 years ago we didn't have the tools to detect those attacks. So are we that bad? Should we move to the countryside and dug ourselves a cave? Well, we have to bear in mind several factors. We've mentioned several examples reflecting attacks to infrastructures that either don't have a good security system or they are accessed when they don't have to. I have been able to visit critical infrastructures, for example, a nuclear power plant, and I have seen, and I am relieved to have seen, that the critical security systems are mechanically controlled and not electronically controlled. So any attack of this sort could help, for example, the functioning of a siren, for example, or a camera or something like that. But the rest need the actual hand of an operator. There are, on the other hand, data from people like, or companies like IBM that have shown that the number of cyber attacks have increased. It's true they have increased, but it's true at the same time that we are more efficient when it comes to detecting them. We can see here that the top destination countries in terms of cyber attacks are number 1, the US, and very far behind China and Israel. Then we have Pakistan and Canada. Where's Spain here? Where are we? I can't see Spain anywhere here. Actually, official rankings don't have us in the top 20 countries. So we are saved on that side, but then you start wondering, where are all these news that we've seen come from? Well, from biased reports that do not gather all the information. As our colleagues from Kaspersky reports, there are countries which are a lot worse off than we are. And an interesting data that I drew from this report is that there is seasonality. Actually, attackers take holiday. Well, in January, there are very, very few attacks. After Christmas, they are not in the mood. And if you realize it, attacks go up again from July on. So think about it. They use vacation periods maybe to prepare new attacks or just to relax. There's something else that we need to bear in mind. In Spain, we have mechanisms such as the ones provided by NPIC for critical infrastructures that apply measures that look good on paper, although they haven't been very widely used in practical terms, but they are being more and more used. When I was preparing this presentation yesterday, INCIBE is preparing something new, and this is my next point. Is there a solution for this all? Well, there are several scenarios. We can use old technology, as I said before, which is unfeasible today in light of how technology is evolving. We need to develop safer and more secure technology. Another one is, well, I can just pretend there's nothing going on, this is not happening to me until it's too late and the problem is already in your house. This is the problem we are seeing, and that is hitting the media. Then there is a problem when you go, woof, I'm so relieved that we weren't attacked. But this is not going to last forever because, well, this is a piece of news from yesterday. INCIBE is going to launch the distribution of tools that will raise the level of cybersecurity. That's very good. It's a good idea, but this really needs to reach the companies in the critical sectors that are to apply this. And of course, these measures need to be applied. They are very nice on paper. A lot of people put a lot of effort into developing these tools, but if there is no updating process attached, and if we don't start changing our mindset, these measures will be useless. So, how can we force these measures from being applied? Well, legally, maybe. We might need to legally force companies to provide these security measures. But in many cases, people just don't have, and companies don't have the resources in order to make this happen. That is on the one hand. On the other hand is listen to people who are devoting their time and knowledge in order to discover these vulnerabilities. If we don't listen to them, or worse, if we accuse them of some things they haven't done, we will be in deep trouble. A lot of people go desperate when they want to report an incident that is affecting a critical structure, for example, a water cleaning system. When they want to contact the company, well, they are not listened to, or they are directly threatened to be sued. So what can we do about this? If you know somebody who is aware of this kind of information, there are channels to communicate it. They can use the security forces, for example, the technology department of the Civil Guard or the National Police, and many other CEPs that we have in every region in Spain. If you want to keep your privacy, then speak to a lawyer and have your lawyer communicate to the security forces. But we cannot penalize researchers who are working very hard to make safer systems and discovering breaches that are to be patched. And if we don't protect these people, the bad guys will win the game. This is going to take time and a lot of money, but the losses that may be generated with this insecurity, if the situation continues like that, and if cyber criminals can continue attacking critical systems without any controls, then the consequences are a lot more. And we're not just talking about not having heating in December in Ukraine. We can have critical systems falling down, for example, hospital-related systems. That is very serious, and we really need to lobby so that the necessary resources are invested not only in Spain but on a world scale, because many times we are interconnected, and the energy we are actually using today isn't maybe coming from Spain but from Algeria, for example. So, if you have questions, I know this is a very peculiar issue, and this is probably the first time you've heard about it, maybe not. A lot of people who are listening to us from the streaming source are maybe having questions also. Please feel free to ask any questions you want and use the microphones. Hello, I've loved your presentation. Regarding the last thing you've said about solutions from professionals, I think the current government in Spain isn't thinking like that. Because I've heard this piece of news saying that the government is trying to recruit volunteers to act as reservists. What do you think about this? The problem is huge. And how is the Spanish government reacting? Well, what has been said about that piece of news isn't totally right. They are looking for cyber reservists. A lot of people here can actually talk about this a lot better than me. For example, Enrique Avila will speak about it. But what they are trying is to enlarge this reservists pool that already exists. But the way they put it wasn't right. If you are a reservist, you don't perceive a salary. You get paid whenever you provide a service. I think what they were trying to say is that you were going to be paid only when you were active. I'm not concerned about what I'm concerned is who has the right aptitudes to work as a reservist, and who can, and if someone can launch attacks saying that they were acting on behalf of the government. It's good that people who are providing services for the government are adequately paid. That's okay. In Spain, we don't lack talent. The problem in Spain is that we export the talent because companies here don't pay enough for the talent that we are generating. That's why people go abroad. People who are trained here are very good. If you take a look at national and international conferences, you can see that Spanish speakers are always the best rated. So it's not a matter of lack of talent, and this happens also with the cyber reserve. How does this work? Do you have to take a test? Do you need a hacker ID? Well, a lot could be debated around this. But my point of view is this. People who act as reservists need to be capable and have the knowledge. They have to, it has to be very clearly defined what they can do and what they cannot do, and they have to be adequately paid. Yes, they have to be valued. I believe that the government isn't valuing these people who are computing professionals who've invested millions of hours and they don't feel they are rewarded. Absolutely, you're totally right. That is the problem. Someone has to say out loud that those millions of hours don't come out of nowhere. It's a lot of people's time, and those people are willing to give all that effort away in case of an emergency, but at the same time they want to be rewarded for it. If people in the military are being paid for defending Spain, these people should be paid as well. The problem here lies in communication, and this isn't new. Because, for example, a few months ago, this piece of news appeared saying, are these the hackers that are going to defend Spain? And that raised a lot of controversy. It is a very complex issue. That's why I don't understand that they are so ambiguous. That's the way things go, and not only for our field, for many others too.
¿Cómo, o sea, volviendo un poquito más atrás al inicio de la presentación?
So now going back to the beginning of your presentation, how can somebody or a group of people install a malware update into an application that is used for tax statements, for example? How isn't this controlled? Well, you have given yourself the answer. In this case, they access public FTP, but their security measures were breached. And what they did was to modify that application to include a file that wasn't originally there. After they did that, People would just download the update, and as a result, their machines were infected. So in this case, they were looking for more direct attacks, for example, ransomware, spyware, etc. So there was a configuration breach on the part of the software development company when it comes to defining who and what can be introduced in updates, and also another failure that involved the fact that the download of updates wasn't controlled.
¿Está? Sí. Buenos días. En primero,
Good morning. First of all, I want to thank you for your very clear presentation. Everyone was able to understand what you were saying. First of all, I would like to make a comment about what you've said, and then a question. Well, the comment is, in most of the cases you've showed, the problem is that people don't use computers for what they are, and they don't have enough training. As a result, most vulnerabilities are related to that. That's just my comment. And the question is, when it comes to Internet of Things, well, I'm quite scared of this kind of thing. We have light bulbs that can be controlled from the Internet, coffee machines that can be controlled from the Internet. I don't think that the security of this kind of elements is very high. I would like to know what your opinion is. Of course, unfortunately, you are right. Most of the Internet of Things devices don't have security as one of their priorities. Why? Because that delays development, and it can take longer to launch a new product to the market. And this is something that we can see very clearly. We have more and more devices of this sort connected, and that would enable criminals to do that kind of thing. For example, last year, a lot of DOS attacks were launched and caused failures in systems such as Spotify, Twitter, and many more. If we multiply this by the millions of devices, vulnerable devices we have, we can be in a lot of trouble. Well, we as consumers can also say, I'm not buying this thing because it's not secure. And on the other hand, we can also promote regulations from the public powers. First of all, thank you for this very thorough presentation that you've prepared. I'm sure that you've put a lot of work into it. I'm a teenager. I'm still learning, and I think I have a long way to go to reach where you are. Well, there are a lot of people who know a lot more than me. Well, my question is, would you recommend teenagers like me to work in cybersecurity? Do you think this is a viable option for a future? Then my second question is, what kind of training should we undertake in order to be experts in cybersecurity? Well, cybersecurity is not a future career, it is a present career. We need people, and the problem is in Spain, as I said, is that a lot of people leave because companies here don't pay enough. And yes, absolutely, you have to love it, of course. This is something that you learn every day. It's not something that you study and then you forget about it. Actually, the training that we have today just gives you basic pillars, very general fundamentals, so that you can specialize with masters, courses, etc. But what is crucial here is the practice. Studying only isn't enough. You need to be curious. you must be interested in knowing how the systems work in order to find security breaches, doing things like the ones you're doing today, attending conferences. I have Edu here, a friend of mine who is a vocational education teacher, and he fosters this among his students. He even organizes Cyber Olympics. You have more chances than we did back at the time because you have thousands of tutorials, documents, practical possibilities. Here at CyberCamp, you have the option of testing your abilities, and a lot of companies are looking for this kind of talent. So take advantage of all the resources you have, be curious, provide the results of your investigations and research to the community, etc. But an important piece of advice: try not to cross the line that divides hackers from criminals. Hackers aren't criminals. They are researchers who look for holes. The ones that cross the lines and use those holes for their own interest, those are criminals. That is difficult because there are a lot of ego problems here. But I encourage you to study things and courses and masters related to computer practice, but practice and continuous learning is vital in this profession. Well, you've said that practice is what we need, but how can we take the theory that we learn in the books to the practical field? It's very easy. How to take the theory to the practice? You have many instruments, many tools that allow you to practice at home by generating scenarios and systems. There are many of them. Most of them are for free. And you have tests, virtual machines, flash captures, many different things that can put your knowledge to the test. And this guy over here can help you do that. Thank you very much.